Wandering stars. What or who is a wandering star? And the question arises, could it have been quoted from one Enoch or was it referenced elsewhere? Now, why would we say one Enoch, Julie?
Well, let me read you 1 Enoch 80, verses 6 to 8. Many leaders of the stars will deviate from their established order. They will change their orbits and duties and not appear as their designated seasons. The entire order of the stars will be hidden from the sinners, and the thoughts of those on the earth will be mistaken about them, leading them to go astray and even regard them as gods. Evil will be multiplied upon them, and punishment will come upon them to destroy all. So it says, leaders of the stars deviate from their established order. Sounds like a wandering star.
Could be. However, Jude, I do not believe, is referencing the book of Enoch. He's referencing Old Testament scripture. Let's look at just a few scriptures, put them together, and you're going to see a very clear picture. Let's start with Job chapter 38. Now, remember, in the 38th chapter of Job, God is now answering Job. Job is kind of basically saying, look, I didn't do anything wrong, da, 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 da. And God is saying, okay, let's get it straight. Who's boss? Were you there when? That's what we're jumping into. So we're going to look at Job 38, verse 4, and then go to verse 7. God says, were you there when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding. Then he goes to verse 7 in that same vein of thinking. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So you've got these morning stars in harmony singing together. Job tells us that. Now we go to Isaiah chapter 14, verse 12. It's a description of Satan, of Lucifer. And it says, how you have fallen from heaven, O star of the morning, son of dawn. You've been cut down to the earth, you who have weakened the nations. So it's taking that morning star and saying, you've wandered off the path. There you have the initial wandering star. In Ezekiel 28, won't quote the verses, but 14 to 16, it's describing Satan. It says, you were the anointed cherub angel who covers. You were blameless in your ways from the day you were created until unrighteousness was found in you. And I've cast you as profane from the mountain of God. You are now without direction. So the concept of wandering stars easily and appropriately comes from the Old Testament, not from one Enoch.
Okay, that does make sense. I have another question. Why would a writing by such a faithful and godly man be out of consideration? We've said Enoch, the real man, was very faithful.
He was. He was a very faithful man. So why would you take that faithful man's writing and not put it in place? And it's a simple two-word answer. Simple
Okay.
two words. Pseudepigraphal authorship.
Okay, that doesn't sound simple. What?
Come on,
Pseudo what,
pseudepigraphal.
a girl?
Yeah. And that's not a word that we use very often at all. So let's describe that. Pseudepigrapha are ancient writings that claim to be authored by famous biblical figures like Enoch,
Okay.
Moses, or Isaiah, but were actually written by someone else, often centuries later. The term pseudepigrapha comes from Greek words meaning false inscription.
Wow.
These texts were usually composed between 300 BCE and 300 CE, so there's a 600-year period of time there, and include Jewish and early Christian works that were never accepted into the official biblical canon. So you've got false authorship using someone else's name, and in the case of Enoch, he lived thousands of years before.
Okay, so I think you're starting to like that pseudepigrapha word.
No, I'm
So,
not. I had to rehearse it again and again and again to be able to say it right. But go ahead.
so by being written centuries after Enoch's lifetime, as you said, by unknown authors, one Enoch failed the early church's standard for prophetic or apostolic origin. So it means later authors wrote under his name to try to give that work a prophetic authority.
Right.
Now, one Enoch they've determined was written around 300 BCE to 100 BCE, originally in Aramaic and Hebrew in Judea during the Second Temple period. That's the time of the rebuilt Jerusalem temple in 516 BCE and its destruction by the Romans in 70 CE. So it's a very specific period of time. It was translated into Greek, but preserved fully only in Ge'ez. That's the classical language of Ethiopia. The themes of 1 Enoch are angelic rebellion of the Nephilim, what we often call the fallen angels, apocalyptic judgment, heavenly calendars, and moral exhortations.
All right, so now you're giving us a description of the book, and you've narrowed it down according to historical documents of a 200-year period, 300 BCE to 100 BCE.
Mhm.
So we're looking at, and again, that's far, far, far away from when Enoch actually lived. So we've
Yes,
got that in order, and its themes are very fantastic. That's really fantastical kind of things and thinking.
that's right. So, what about the Book of Enoch as its historical value? So, it offers insights into what these ancient peoples thought during this Second Temple Judaism. It bridges the time gap between the Old and the New Testaments.
It does. It does. And while the history is valuable, it's interesting that the Holy Bible leaves this period of time as a 400-year gap. And it leaves that period of time there for a purpose. So, what we're saying is the book of Malachi was written 400 years before Jesus was born.
And Malachi is the last book of the Old
Right.
Testament.
Right. Here's the way the Bible sets it up. And this, folks, look, this cannot be a coincidence. The very last words of the Old Testament introduce the very first events of the New Testament. The last words, 400 years later, are introducing the first event. Let's look at those last words of the Old Testament, Malachi chapter 4, verses 5 and 6.
Behold, I am going to send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and terrible day of the Lord. He will restore the hearts of the fathers to their children and the hearts of the children to their fathers, so that I will not come and smite the land with a curse. Obviously, this isn't the old Elijah the prophet. What does that mean?
And what happens, the very first event of the New Testament is the angel appearing to Zacharias in the temple, saying
Mhm.
to Zacharias, you and Elizabeth are going to have a son. His name is going to be John the Baptist, and he will come in the spirit of Elijah. And it quotes exactly this verse. So what it's saying is you've got in the spirit of Elijah, this man coming to introduce Jesus. So the Old Testament ends saying that's going to happen. And the New Testament begins saying, here it is. Now there was 400 years in between. That's the way the Bible was designed.
So, in other words, God's not going to have a bunch of writings in between that mess up
Right.
that bridge, specifically old to new, the exact words.
Right, right. And it's 400 years later, and but
Yeah.
it's seamless at the same time. So
Yeah.